Abū Ḥudhayfah didn't just free Salim, he did something much, much harder. He put his reputation, his tribe, and his household on the line to say, basically, this man is my family.
Exactly.
Right.
See, the idea of honor in that society from being strictly accorded to either bloodline or material wealth has not shifted. But as a general rule, people who came from wealthy families maintained wealth in pre-industrial societies.
Sure.
Nothing specific about Arab society.
Sure.
But here, honor was primarily from the bloodline. And Utbah ibn Rabi'a is a person who is consistent. Later on, he does say, it's not something I would have approved of, but since you've done it, this is now my grandson.
Right.
Wow. I mean, just think of that. He says, now that you've done it, Abū Ḥudhayfah, I recognize Salim as my grandson.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I say anything else, I want to say how exciting taping these episodes is. As we, have discussion after discussion, more and more comes out, and I'm more and more a believer in the method that our founder and our lead facilitator, Brother Assad Koshul, has really pioneered here, bringing the Seerah alive in a very, very new way. So thank you, Brother Assad, before I open the conversation. So some revolutions don't begin in palaces or battlefields. They begin in homes, they begin in communities. In the episode that we're talking about today, it's just a 45-second clip, I believe, from the lessons, but we witness one of the most radical social acts in early Meccan society. A nobleman, Abū Ḥudhayfah, frees his slave Salim and then does the unthinkable. He actually adopts him as his son. If you watch the episode in Arabic, he says, he inherits from me and I inherit from him. In a society where bloodlines were everything, this wasn't just personal, it was actually a political act. Again, I'm Sajjad, I'm with Assad Koshul here to unpack a very quiet act of resistance that helped really reshape what it meant to belong and to have ties of kinship. Assad?
Okay. So, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Thank you very much again, Sajjad, for being the interlocutor here. And so, as Sajjad outlined, this is seen as a act of Abū Ḥudhayfah radiallahu anhu at a personal level. At a personal level, he has a slave, and Salim radiallahu anhu, and Abū Ḥudhayfah radiallahu anhu, who is, first of all, let's unpack who Abū Ḥudhayfah radiallahu anhu is. He is Utbah ibn Rabi'a's son.
Right.
And Hind is his sister.
Correct. So
and
major family.
Exactly. And Hind is Abu Sufyan's wife.
Right.
So Abū Ḥudhayfah is from the noble class. Right. So this is not anybody setting a slave free, but it's beyond that. Is that he makes a public proclamation at the Kaaba. And then not only does he set him free and make a public proclamation at the Kaaba, he says he will have inheritance rights. Salim will have inheritance rights. This is unprecedented. Slaves have been set free.
Right. Right.
But this idea, and again, think of the historical context. We also have to judge what is happening here in the context in which it emerged. This is unprecedented. Yeah. And his own father, Utbah ibn Rabi'a, hears of this proclamation publicly just like everybody else.
Yeah, he wasn't prepped or
he wasn't prepped.
It was all things out at the same time.
Exactly. And so here, we should think the significance of the public proclamation. Again, at the most holiest of all places.
Right, in the shade of the Kaaba.
In the shade. And he sets him free and he gives him inheritance rights. Another major dimension to this is when we study the Seerah, we look at personality clashes. And again, just a binary of these were the people who were good and these were the people who were evil. That is a very simplistic and very infantile way of evaluating things. Right. And you can't do thematic analysis. But let's think about this from one perspective. How is this viewed? Just think for a moment, this public proclamation that Abū Ḥudhayfah makes, the type of position it puts his father in.
quite uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Given his position in Dar al-Nadwa
and leader of that clan.
Right.
Leader of his own clan. So he's got to honor his son's proclamation.
It was done in front of everybody.
It was done in front of everybody. And it's not something, as we go on, you see, he says, listen, and Utbah ibn Rabi'a is a person who is consistent. So later on he does say, it's not something I would have approved of, but since you've done it, this is now my grandson.
Right.
Wow. I mean, just think of that. He says, now that you've done it, Abū Ḥudhayfah, I recognize Salim as my grandson.
Salim. So
Salim, yes,
Abū Ḥudhayfah actually names him, says Salim ibn Abū Ḥudhayfah ibn Utbah ibn Rabi'a, so in front of everybody.
Exactly.
Right? And so by giving him also the name of his grandfather, effectively, right?
Of that lineage.
So Utbah ibn Rabi'a is also put in a very
awkward.
Yeah. That's the great word. Great word. So he's in an awkward position, and his name has been given to somebody who is being adopted by his son. So it really obliges him to recognize it and say, okay, I understand what was done.
Yes, but what Utbah does do is that after this, when he engages with Salim, he respects him like a grandson. So that's and the other major thing that we should look at, this is a major breakthrough, not just politically but socially. Because setting a slave free is one thing, but adopting him is another thing altogether.
So you're actually redrawing the lines here.
You're redrawing the lines of the social order with this act, because this is a challenge to the social order. Because slaves are set free, but they're not adopted with inheritance rights. And so this creates a very interesting dynamic from that perspective, that at an individual level, some of the companions are doing things, let's call it a shot across the bow, that are challenging the unjust social order. At an individual level, let's be very clear on this. Okay, so here, one of the major themes when we study the Seerah, one of the 40 themes is social status, and another one is say social class. And setting slaves is one thing, free, but adopting them, right? And this concept of brotherhood, the Ummah, is now being practiced openly, even among what? Former master and former slave.
At a very early stage.
Very early stage. And again, this is before...
There's no politics here. There's no Medina. There's nothing.
The torture has not even started yet.
The torture has not even started yet.
Yes. So, the torture of Sumayya radiallahu anha, the first martyr in Islam, the torture of Bilāl radiallahu anhu, the torture and then of Yasir radiallahu anhu, that hasn't started yet. The parents of Ammar, that hasn't started yet. Right. So we have to keep this very early. So here, the concept of brotherhood is being practiced out in the open at the Kaaba, but not just between two people who say, we're the same religion, between former master and slave.
Right.
Could there be any more radical social invention from that perspective?
Yeah. No, like you said, it was before, like you said before, it was unprecedented.
Yeah. And another major thing, even very early on, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his position on slavery, that he encourages kindness to slaves and to setting them free. Again, understand the historical context, 7th century Arabia. So for example, I was attending one session and they were talking about the U.S. and the person who was speaking, they were let's say slightly to the left, and they were making certain comments about, say, some of the founding fathers. And, I understand those things are historically accurate. But, it is a little intellectually dishonest to judge people in 2025, with 2025 thinking that lived 250 years ago. You have to judge them also, to a certain extent, in the historical context in which they live and operate.
Sure. I mean, you can't measure them by today's standards.
Exactly. Because even society does evolve, right? Like most people throughout the world today generally would say slavery is something that should be outlawed. So here, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his message of definitely treating slaves kindly is a requirement. Setting them free is not.
No.
Has done even more than that.
Well, yeah, and so it's actually gone from slavery to brotherhood.
Exactly. And that's a tremendous not even from slavery to an equal, let's say, citizen.
No, it's actually establishing kinship.
Exactly. And that's why this is such a breakthrough event in the Seerah. And then this is when we say sensationalize the Seerah versus operationalize the Seerah. This is not the Battle of Badr 313 against 1,000, but you see how rich this lesson is, how dynamic it is.
It's actually not even driven. I mean, I'm thinking about what happens eventually when the Muslims migrate to Medina, and the Prophet ﷺ, he effects this brotherhood, the muwakhat. That brotherhood is driven by the need to settle the muhajirun with the ansar.
Yeah,
right.
Settle the migrants
Right.
with the local residents.
The local residents. So there's a driver there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, here, there's no real driver except to say that this is something that I'm going to do for this person, and he actually gives this person status from a societal perspective,
Exactly.
from a family perspective, and so it's going from a tribal basis to literally, some sort of universal belonging based on the affiliation, and saying he's going to inherit from me and I'm going to inherit from him.
Yes, exactly. Now the Abd Shams clan has another member, which they are obligated to protect
And honor.
and honor.
Right. So it's not just through blood. It's actually through some principle.
Exactly.
Right.
In this case of adoption.
Right.
Another key point in this is, as we mentioned, personality clashes. You see how Utbah is caught off guard with this, right? Well, everyone is caught off guard with the announcement. But what happens is, you see Abu Jahl sees this. So wait a second. Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's followers are going to set people free and then adopt them and give them inheritance rights?
Right.
This is not something that we want happening. It disrupts the social order.
I mean, if it had been done privately, would that maybe have changed things?
I think, it's a speculative question. I think, yes. I mean, if it were privately and it trickled out, people would have thought probably it was a rumor maybe. But, this is why these people are smart. They're savvy. They're not illiterate Bedouin Arabs. They have a code of conduct. Even the way Abū Ḥudhayfah-ra done this is earth-shaking. He goes to the holiest place. He makes a public proclamation. He says, I'm setting him free. He says, this is his name, okay? And I'm from him and he's from me.
Oh, so it's actually sanctified.
Exactly.
Because it is in the precinct of the Kaaba.
And he does it because it's something that he wants to do. And it even catches his own father, who he honors. He honors really off guard in an awkward position. And it forces his father also later on he says, this is not something I would have done, but now that my son has done it, you are part of family. To Salim.
And that conversation happens in private, but it's based on the public proclamation.
Exactly. And I think one other thing here is other slaves. How did they respond to this announcement?
Right. So there's Bilāl and Wahshī.
Wahshī, yeah, these two. And from a personality perspective, Bilāl and Wahshī, like say on the totem pole, they're both at the bottom. Abyssinian slaves in that society at that time.
Right.
Bilāl is overjoyed and saying, I'm very happy for Salim. And Wahshī, because his worldview, the way he thinks, is he's not happy for Salim, and he's like, why not me?
So
and
he's more expectant.
Exactly. And you see how Bilāl's heart, and at this point, Bilāl has not come into Islam, is a joyful heart, is an open heart.
Right.
And you can see Wahshī's heart is not a joyful heart.
It's dark,
a resentful
and
heart.
It's resentful. Right?
It's a resentful heart. He's like, I want to be free too, but what has Salim done that I haven't?
Right. So the expectation there.
And this reveals a lot about the character of each one of them. Right. Bilāl, radiallahu anhu, and he's not radiallahu anhu yet, and versus Wahshī, who also eventually becomes radiallahu anhu.
Sure. Yes. Later on.
Later on.
Correct, yes. So as we move towards wrapping up here, let me ask a couple of quick questions, maybe in the interest of trying to, again, apply, operationalize, based on all this context that we've set, right? There's this fullness, if I can use that word, that maybe applies to this act, right? We talked about the public versus the private. We talked about naming Salim, right? He could have just said, "Hey, I'm adopting Salim," and not made the proclamation about the name or anything. So there's a fullness to this act.
Yes.
Okay? And it wasn't just in word, it was actually structural, right?
Yes.
So what does that mean? Like how would that translate today? I mean, we talk a lot about community, right? We talk a lot about the Muslim community. On Eid we get together, everybody hugs each other, but yet we still sometimes observe and maybe feel and maybe also experience this lack of fullness that perhaps we want to establish and we want to see something similar to this. So what does that mean today, or what could it mean today?
No, I think Abū Ḥudhayfah does is a very, it may be seen in one respect where he set us slave free, but the manner in which he does it. So Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah said, Hikmah is doing the right thing at the right time in the right manner. I'm not sure if it's in that order, but the right thing,
Ibn
the right,
Qayyim.
yeah. And here, this is just not what he does; it's the manner in which he does it.
So it's not only what you do; it's how you do it.
It's how you do it, and it's also the timing, right?
When you do it.
When he does it, and he does it like at the height of the day, right? He does it at where that people are usually, because where Dar al-Nadwa is just within visual proximity to the Kaaba.
Right.
It's geographic location.
Right.
So people hear this. People hear this public proclamation. And there's no doubt. There's no room for ambiguity. Though this is a rumor, he might have set him free, but he hasn't adopted him. There's no room for ambiguity. It's very clear. He says explicitly he will have the Ibn Rabi'a name.
Right.
And so this is the thing. So, when we look at this, you see slavery versus brotherhood.
Right.
You see that the Muslims are coalescing into a cohesive social unit based on faith, not on blood ties and tribal alliances or lineages.
Right. Which I mean, in this case, we also see that they've already started fraying based on all the conversations we've had about the conflict of values and political expediency, etc. There's already some cracks there.
Yeah, exactly. So Salim-ra radiallahu anhu is not preaching brotherhood; he's practicing brotherhood. So this kind of is a polite way to answer the question you raised about, it can be argued in contemporary times, some of our brotherhood is maybe a little bit superficial, right?
They're walking the talk.
Yeah, exactly.
So they didn't just talk, they walked as well. Maybe, when we think about inclusion, how do we think about inclusion maybe here, right? It's not just tolerance. And
exactly.
In this case, let's maybe just sort of tease this out. If it was a case where simply a slave was freed, that freed slave would likely be tolerated,
yes,
but not necessarily included
exactly
in society.
Yes, that free slave would still have to rely on his former master for protection.
Right.
Now this is very different, that here this freed slave is part of family, and the whole Abd al-Shams clan is obligated to protect him.
And what does this also say about, sort of this, it maybe sounds cliche, but, the fact that a faith tie can actually effectively be more consequential than blood.
Yeah, it supersedes a blood tie. And this is the thing, the entire basis of the political and social system is tribalism.
It's blood.
Yeah, it's blood, tribalism. And so here, this is saying, no, there will be a new social order. There's a new social invention. Society will be reorganized around faith, not blood, not lineage, not chance, but choice. And that's a revolutionary idea.
And later on we read, of course, in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, that, the one that is most noble of amongst you are the ones who are most aware and fearing of God. So faith there again becomes the criterion for nobility in the sight of God, right? So
yes, and let's keep this in mind. Also, in later on in the history of the Sahaba, Salim-ra radiallahu anhu is a major Quran teacher,
okay,
and a leader of prayer.
Okay,
because what happens is Salim-ra radiallahu anhu is leading Abū Ḥudhayfah in prayer, radiallahu anhu in prayer, and this really upsets his father. He says, "Wait a second, Because at that time, even worshiping God or Allah or gods was a class affair.
Right.
And here, so Salim eventually, because he was a better reciter, he leads Abū Ḥudhayfah in prayer, which is again breaking a political and social barrier, but also a psychological barrier.
I remember that scene. It's quite powerful.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is where you're going from tribalism to universal belonging based on faith.
And it's structural because he has said he will, inherit from me. He gave him the name. So it wasn't this sort of superficial, faith-based, he's my Muslim brother. It actually said, no, we are one family, quote unquote. And,
exactly.
And I mean, I think this also informs again what comes later on, which is the hurma and the sacredness of blood based on common belief, common belief community. So Abū Ḥudhayfah didn't just free Salim; he did something much, much harder. He put his reputation, his tribe, and his household on the line to say, basically, this man is my family.
Exactly. Yeah. And the idea of honor has shifted. Right. See, the idea of honor in that society from being strictly accorded to either bloodline or material wealth has now shifted. And do we understand how radical a departure this is from the societal norm at that time, again, in 7th century Arabia?
It was bloodline or
wealth, right?
Or wealth, right.
Like that if you were able to generate a lot of wealth, you had, some stature, right? Obviously the most important, but as a general rule, people who came from wealthy families maintained wealth in pre-industrial societies.
Sure.
Nothing specific about Arab society.
Sure.
But here, honor was primarily from the bloodline. And now here, Salim radiallahu anhu is being honored based on new understanding of importance of human beings and their status in society. And you can see this is the threat that the hawks were concerned about. That these working class people or slaves or lower class, right? They exist, fine, we tolerate them, but they are there to serve us and our status. They're not supposed to think independently and have, as much freedom, for lack of a better word.
Yeah,
there's a hierarchy.
The stratification stays.
Exactly.
Right? So that whatever that kind of caste system based on tribe was not disturbed, even when somebody was freed.
Exactly.
You sort of stayed in your own lane. You didn't cross over into my lane. You stayed in your lane, right? I mean, it's fair to say, right? I mean, this was one of the earliest blueprints for the Ummah, where dignity wasn't inherited through blood, but it was earned through belief, and then it was proven or affirmed through action. So here's what we'll leave you with today from our session. What systems of exclusion are we still upholding in our community? Not through hate, but through habit. And actually, I think it would not be improper for us to say, what systems of inclusion are we still upholding beyond our own Muslim community, but as human beings? I think we see a lot of that happening, whether it's politics or even ethnic lines. You see a lot of exclusion happening, and that's just all habit, right? I mean,
well, Ali radiallahu anhu said either we're all brothers and sisters in faith or equals in humanity.
Either we're all
brothers and sisters in faith if you're Muslim, or equals in humanity.
Okay, so it's one of those two things.
Exactly.
Right? So that means that we're not putting others down. We are their equals as humans.
Exactly.
All right? So it's either you're in the faith community or just as humans you're. Can you repeat that again the last time?
We're all brothers and sisters in faith or equals in humanity.
Subhanallah. Very powerful.
That's a saying from Ali radiallahu anhu.
Well, thank you, Assad, and thank you everybody for joining us for today's session. We'll see you soon, inshallah, for the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.